All right, wanted to take some time out today to talk about a team that I think has been very surprising with their performance this season, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. As things stand, they are currently in the fifth spot in the Eastern Conference. Now, by the time this video is out, by the time a lot of you have probably seen it, maybe that number will change just a bit. But regardless of what happens, regardless of what the results are, Atlanta has been off to a very good start, in my opinion, right? Based off of my own predictions in the offseason, they're performing way, way better than I thought they would. So coming into the season, if you look at Atlanta, very confusing team. The phrase I use to define this team is stuck in the middle, right? Like it felt like they were trying to figure out, hey, do we try to push this thing with Trae Young, or do we go all in and try to rebuild? Obviously, they had the number one overall pick and got Zachary Ricochet, and it kind of felt like they were torn in between both places. It felt like they didn't really know what it was that they wanted to do as a franchise, but the front office seemed very confident. They seemed comfortable despite what I think and despite what other people have thought. And so far this season, they have been off to a great start. It's been really good seeing them defy a lot of the expectations, whether good or bad, primarily bad, that people had about them in the offseason. And the thing is, this has not been a spectacular season for Trae Young. Like, I thought this was going to be a year where Trae Young was putting up ridiculous numbers, and they still have been impressive to a certain degree. But I thought it was going to be a thing where he was putting up these ridiculous numbers while the rest of the team was bad, right? I thought it was going to be a year where Trae Young was quote unquote carrying them to a certain extent. And I hate saying carrying because basketball is a team sport. There are five guys out there on the court, just not one. But that's not been the case so far this season here for Atlanta. Trae Young has been solid enough. The percentages have not been good at all. He's been pretty bad from an efficiency standpoint, but guys around him are picking up the slack at a very high level. There are so many great performers outside of Trae Young this season. All-star level guys, probably not, but still amazing all-around performances from role players, especially some of their wings. And the guy I'm going to start with, obviously, is going to be Jalen Johnson. I have been a massive fan of what he has done this season. I've been a massive fan of his growth this year. He's nearing 20 points per game. He's around 50% from the floor. Three-point shooting around 35%, which I think is around the league average. Not an amazing three-point shooter, but looks very, very confident out there in catch and shoot situations. And he's really a coach's dream. When you have an athletic 6'9" wing, you can really plug him into so many different places. One thing they do a ton is utilizing him as a rebound and push guy. He's averaging 10 rebounds per game, one of the best averages on the season, probably the best average rebound-wise in the season for a player at his position. And the reason that works for Atlanta's offense is because if you have a guy like him who can rebound well, who's that athletic and can handle the ball like a guard, you can rebound and push and initiate early offense. That translates to why Atlanta is number 2 right now in pace. So one of the things they've done a great job at this season is dictating the pace of the game, right? Pace translates to the idea that you are able to play style of basketball that you want to play night in and night out. And you may lose some games, but you at least want to win playing a game that you are comfortable with. And Atlanta night in, night out this season has done a great job at dictating the pace. As I said, number 2 in that category. And a lot of that is because Jalen Johnson, as a versatile wing, can rebound, push the ball up court, and open up the offense, whether that's him finishing at the basket himself or finding other guys. Leads me right over to my next point. His passing this season has been so good, whether it's in transition or in the half court. It's not just average stuff. It's not like he's just penetrating and kicking and finding guys, which is still a pretty difficult thing to do in the NBA because the decision making there has to be at a very high level. But he is making some really good passes. He's finding cutters. He's doing a million different things, operating as a playmaker either out of the perimeter or out of the short roll. Brings me over to my next point, and I kind of referenced this a little bit earlier. The versatility in which you can use Jalen Johnson makes him a coach's dream. You can have him rebound and run, like I explained. You can have him operate from outside the three-point line and attack the basket. He has been so good getting downhill off the dribble. And you can have him in pick and roll scenarios because he's really good and athletic, and also because he has that court vision, because he has that playmaking ability, he can do things out of the short roll. And if you watch a lot of offenses today, A lot of great offenses have players who can make reads out of the short roll, right? The Celtics have that. They have one of the best offenses in the league because they have players who can screen, roll, and then in the middle of the court, make plays and find guys out in the perimeter or maybe cutting towards the basket around the dunker spot and things like that. And we have seen Jalen Johnson do that at a very high level. If Jalen Johnson never becomes an all-star player, if he never becomes a superstar, the least he will do is be a high-level contributor on a contender. His skill set is that of what you'd want on a contending team out of a wing. Somebody who can be athletic, who's also very versatile, can be a Swiss Army knife guy with his athleticism, ability to finish, and also that ability to play make. Shooting is going to continue to need some work, like I said, around 35%, which is league average, right? But you want him to be around like that 37, 38% mark if you want to be like a legitimate three-point threat. For defenses to really respect at a high level, to make him a real threat out there, to open up your offense as a whole. But either way, regardless of the three-point shooting, which, as I said, hasn't been bad, it's been decent enough. He has been so good to me. He's been the candidate for most improved player, the top candidate for most improved player. There are a lot of guys right now in that conversation, but Jalen Johnson has been my pick so far. He's emerged as a legitimate second option within this Atlanta Hawks offense. And I don't want to like dumb down an NBA offense to having a good first or second option, but he's played that role very well. Love what he's done. Dyson Daniels has been a defensive monster this season. This is not a jaw-dropping Atlanta Hawks defense, right? They're not dominant the entire way through, but they're able to make great defensive plays and have these great defensive moments, some that come at the turning point in games, primarily because of what Dyson Daniels is able to do. He is an amazing on-ball defender, amazing pickpocket guy, has an amazing knack for getting the ball. He's worked well within the starting lineup as a defensive threat. That's what he was drafted to be. If he can continue to round out his three-point shooting, which hasn't been great this season, the mechanics look great, right? Like at times he looks confident out there at least, but the shots aren't falling. But if he can end up knocking down three-point shots at a high level, we're talking about one of the 5 best 3-and-D guys across the entire NBA, flat out. And if Lou Dort could grow into a really efficient three-point shooter and a legitimate threat from beyond the three-point line, then Dyson Daniels can do that as well. But his defense this year has been great. I think he is an all-defensive candidate. Great stuff from those two wings. Like I said, I love Trae Young and what he's done. And I love the overall production from a number of guys. DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu coming off the bench, very productive. Ricochet hasn't been very efficient, but is looking more and more comfortable as the games go on. That stuff has been great, but the ultimate highlight this season has been the play of those two wings and Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson. They have just been flat out amazing. They're a massive reason behind Atlanta's success. Trae Young has also been great, and I think he's been good enough, given how good the Atlanta Hawks record is right now, to possibly be in the All-Star game. All-NBA, I don't know, but another All-Star season does look like it's on the horizon here for Trae Young. Just great stuff here. And what I've liked from Trae Young is he's shown this ability to win in different contexts, right? Like that's something I've talked about with Stephen Curry, and I'm not saying Trae Young is Stephen Curry just yet. I'm not making that comparison in the first place, but one thing Curry was really good at was finding ways to win with like a different supporting cast, right? So the championship he won in 2015 was massively different than the championship he won in 2017. And that's the same way for when he won it in 2022. He has this ability to be successful with different supporting casts. We've seen Trae Young do just that, right? Like we saw him help lead his team to the conference finals. That was a completely different roster than what it is now, where Atlanta is seeing some early season success. Completely different, a lot more reliant on some younger players. Dyson Daniels is still relatively early in his NBA career. Jalen Johnson is still early in his NBA career. Ricochet obviously is extremely early in his NBA career, this being his first season. Trae Young is finding ways to win with this group. I'm using the Steph Curry example to say that that's a unique skill set that Curry has, having this ability to coexist with different guys and win with different guys. And Trae Young is teasing us a bit with that, right? With his ability to be on winning teams and win games with just a different supporting cast over the years. Now, there are a lot of points of improvement for Atlanta. They have to find like a consistent identity. Right now, there isn't something that they're just like flat out amazing at. So usually I'm referencing a team that has either an amazing offense or a lockdown defense or both, right? Like Atlanta right now doesn't have that. They're not a dominant defense and they're not a dominant offense. They're primarily able to dictate pace, dominate the boards, and things like that. But there's not something right now largely that they are just flat out dominant at. So that's one thing you'd want them to work on. The defense, especially, could use some work. But like I said, I just like the individual production on this team. I think they are trending upwards. I'm a lot more optimistic about this team's future than what I was in the offseason. And maybe it's a thing where they invest in really developing Ricochet, continuing to develop Jalen Johnson, and they're able to build a contender through that. Maybe that ends up being a reality. Now, I hope Jalen Johnson doesn't end up becoming like a John Collins. And that's not downing John Collins at all because John Collins has still been really good right now for Utah. But there was a point where John Collins was trending upwards and looking like an all-star level player at a certain point. But he never really got there, right? And so with Jalen Johnson, I hope this isn't a thing where Jalen Johnson is teasing us with this amazing production and putting up these great numbers, but he can never truly get there. And again, I'm not downing John Collins. John Collins is an amazing player. We know how good he is on the floor here with Utah and alongside with Lauri Markkanen, but for Atlanta, you don't want a situation where a guy is putting up these really productive numbers, but just can never truly cross over. The hope is that Jalen Johnson can emerge as a second star around Trae Young. That is what you'd want to see. But amazing stuff here for Atlanta. Amazing stuff here for Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels. Love Trae Young's play as well. Love the overall play here for this team. And let's see if they can stay consistent as the season continues to progress on.